honor your father and your mother, that your days may be long in the land that the Lord your God is giving you. The fifth commandment. If you went to Sunday school as a kid, then there's no way you won't have heard this commandment. Well, you will at least have heard the first part, honor your father and mother, because the second part, which gives the motivation to obey this commandment, the one that says that your days may be long in the land that the Lord your God has given you, is not going to convince too many kids. In other words, what kid is going to think, oh, all right, I'll honor my mom and dad so that I can live a long life in the land that God promised to his people? No kid is going to think that way. And I assume that not even a kid growing up among the ancient Israelites would have thought that way. So what does this tell us? It tells us that, as is the case with all the commandments, the fifth commandment is directed first and foremost to adults. So, parents, before you look at your kids now with an expression that says, see, it's the word of God that commands you to respect me, not me. Remember that this commandment is directed to you first, regardless of whether you've grown up and started a family of your own. And kids, don't get ahead of yourselves either, because obviously the fifth commandment applies to you as well. Whoever belongs to the community of God is subject to his word. The fifth commandment is addressed to all of us, big and small. But an important question is, what does it mean to honor one's father and mother? Notice that the commandment does not say, obey your father and mother. To honor your parent is a verb which could include various applications, among which obedience can surely belong. But honor is a general term. And in this passage, we're not given an example of how it might be applied practically. The Hebrew word, which we translate as honor, is the word kaved, which has the same root with the word that we translate glory. The word kaved communicates this idea of weightiness. To honor one's parents, then, at the very least, means that you'll take them into account. You'll consider them in a serious manner. You cannot be indifferent to your parents. Their presence in your life will have to carry a certain weightiness that cannot be ignored. So I'd like for us now to look together at a story from the Gospel of Luke, where we encounter the response of the 12-year-old Jesus to the maternal and paternal anxiety of his earthly parents, Joseph and Mary. We witness here a unique and noteworthy scenario in which honor is shown to one's parents. So I'll now read from Luke 2, verses 41 to 51. Every year, Jesus' parents went to Jerusalem for the festival of the Passover. When he was 12 years old, they went up to the festival according to the custom. After the festival was over, while his parents were returning home, the boy Jesus stayed behind in Jerusalem, but they were unaware of it. Thinking he was in their company, they traveled on for a day. Then they began looking for him among their relatives and friends. When they did not find him, they went back to Jerusalem to look for him. After 3 days, they found him in the temple courts, sitting among the teachers, listening to them and asking them questions. Everyone who heard him was amazed at his understanding and his answers. When his parents saw him, they were astonished. His mother said to him, "Son, why have you treated us like this? Your father and I have been anxiously searching for you." "Why were you searching for me?" he asked. "Didn't you know that I had to be in my father's house?" But they did not understand what he was saying to them. Then he went down to Nazareth with them and was obedient to them. But his mother treasured all these things in her heart. There are many important things that we can gather from this story. Firstly, we should say that the original intent of recording this story probably wasn't for it to become a moral lesson about how to behave towards one's parents. That being said, we can certainly learn some important lessons from the young Jesus, who does not abolish but fulfills the law of the Old Testament. So I'd like for us to make 2 key observations, and of course if you observe other important things in the story, you can discuss them in your groups. The first observation is this: Jesus did something that caused his parents anxiety. He stayed in Jerusalem by himself as a 12-year-old kid, and he didn't tell his parents that he was going to do that. And in addition to this, his parents clearly did not receive Jesus' decision as an act of honor towards them, but rather as an act which did not sufficiently consider how it would affect them. "Son, why have you treated us like this?" Mary asks. Now, what can we learn from this? Well, first off, before drawing our conclusions, we need to insistently remind ourselves that Jesus Christ is the perfect interpreter, as he is the perfect fulfillment of the law. By reminding ourselves of this, we can then rightly assume that he is not indifferent to the fifth commandment, and we can further assume that he's the one who understands and fulfills the fifth commandment better than any other person on the planet. I mean, think about what we just read. At 12 years old, Jesus is sitting among all the learned and trained teachers of the law, and he's left them in awe with the things that he's saying. They're amazed at his wisdom and knowledge in relation to the law. So, this faithful interpreter and practitioner of the law leaves his parents and drives them nearly to an anxiety attack. So the question is, can one provoke this in one's parents and at the same time honor them? The short answer is yes. Honoring your parents does not mean that every decision you make in your life will have to be a decision that won't cause them to worry. Your parents are going to stress out over you and worry about you because they love you, and you'll have to respect that. But that doesn't mean that your whole life has to be governed by your parents' anxiety. In other words, honoring my parents does not mean that I always have to do what they want. Now, it's the second time in this video that the kid is listening and he's getting excited, and the parents are getting anxious. Maybe you parents are thinking, yeah, what you're saying may be true for me as an adult, but what's the matter with you telling this stuff to my kids? That's an understandable worry, and that's why it's time to move on to the second observation about this passage. Jesus, although he knows what he's doing, and although he has a much greater grasp than his parents do of what's going on, he returns home with them and submits to them. The translation we read says he was obedient to them, but the ancient Greek text says that he was in submission to them. In other words, the 12-year-old Jesus chose to live under the guidance of his parents. He decided to have such a level of respect for his parents that he placed himself under their authority. I find this absolutely incredible. Luke has just told us about the wisdom of this child, which exceeds the wisdom and knowledge of all his elders and all the people who've lived long lives and have studied longer than Jesus of Nazareth has been alive. And Luke has just shown us that Jesus knows what he's doing. And he's told his parents that what he's doing is reasonable, it makes sense. And his parents don't understand, and yet, despite all this, he returns home with his mother and father and submits to them. Kids, many are the times that you want to do something. You know why it would be a good thing to do, but your parents just don't understand. Many are the times that you believe something, you know why you believe it, but your parents think that what you believe is naive or stupid or immature. And when this happens, I imagine that you either want to do what you want to do or believe what you want to believe in secret so that your parents don't learn about it, or in rebellion so that they do learn about it and so that they'll understand that whatever they think, you're going to do what you want to do. But Jesus doesn't do this. He returns home with his parents and submits to them. And the amazing thing is that Jesus is always right. He's always right. Whereas you are sometimes right, and other times your parents are right. You're right sometimes, and other times your parents are right. We can learn a lot from Jesus' example, but always remembering that we are not Jesus. We make mistakes, and sometimes we're wrong. And I'm speaking to the kids now, but of course the same holds true for the adults listening who also have parents. Even if you're right, or even if you think you're right, there's always room for respect towards our parents. The fifth commandment is directed toward anyone who has a mother or a father. It speaks to us about what our disposition and our actions are to look like toward our parents. And you might be thinking, well, what about the parents? Isn't there a commandment for them to tell them how they ought to behave towards their kids? Can they just do whatever they want to us? It's a good question, especially for those who unfortunately don't have good parents. There are many parents who don't exactly make honoring them easy. When Ephesians 6, Paul quotes the fifth commandment as he's addressing children, saying, "Children, obey your parents in the Lord, for this is right. Honor your father and mother, which is the first commandment with a promise, so that it may go well with you and that you may enjoy long life on the earth." And then he continues, "Fathers, do not exasperate your children. Instead, bring them up in the training and instruction of the Lord." So we see that God requires upright behavior from parents towards their children. This is a big issue, and we don't have time to unpack it here, but I just wanted to bring it up because I know that, unfortunately, many parents are not good to their children. So in sum, we saw that honoring your parents does not mean that every decision in your life will have to be one that doesn't cause your parents anxiety. Yet we also saw that even if you're right, or you think you're right, it is still good for children to submit to their parents. And there's always room to respect our parents. And finally, we saw that the Bible does not only require right behavior of children towards their parents, but also of parents towards their children. Well, I hope I've given you plenty to discuss and that you have a fruitful discussion in your group. I'll see you next week.